Hey there, and welcome to Tales by June, where hearts break, heal, and sometimes seek revenge. Let's begin today's story.
Hey, before we begin, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.
They say silence is strength, but that day, silence was the chain that kept me small. Every morning, I wore my smile like armor. I painted it carefully in the mirror, the way some people draw eyeliner. I told myself, just get through today. The office was always cold. Not from the air conditioning, from the people. From their perfect smiles, their polished laughter, their subtle way of reminding me that I didn't belong. The new intern with the difficult name, they called me Mira. I corrected them once. Twice. Then I stopped. They said it like it was too heavy for their tongues, too foreign to fit their neat little world. My accent made them smirk. My clothes too simple. My lunch too spicy. My silence too convenient. Still, I worked hard. Harder than anyone. I stayed late, fixed their mistakes, polished their presentations. When they got praised, I smiled. Because that's what you do when you're trying to belong. You smile, even when it hurts. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Monday, the kind that starts with spilled coffee and ends with regret. I had spent the weekend perfecting a client proposal, weeks of research, nights of revisions. I was proud of it. It was my chance to prove I wasn't just the intern. That morning, I walked into the meeting room with my laptop and trembling hands. My manager, Ethan, was already there, tall, confident, the kind of man who made the room feel smaller just by standing in it. He smiled at me, that easy smile that made everyone trust him. "Morning, Mira," he said. "I reviewed your draft. Great work." His tone was kind. Too kind. "Thank you," I said softly. The team filed in, chatter, perfume, the sound of heels against tile. I sat at the far end of the table, my notes ready. When the presentation began, I waited for my cue. But Ethan never called my name. He clicked through my slides like they were his. He used my words, my ideas, my design. Every line I had written echoed from his mouth like it belonged to him. My chest tightened. I wanted to speak, but my throat burned. When the client clapped, Ethan smiled and said, "Teamwork makes the dream work." And they all laughed. That moment felt endless, like watching your reflection shatter in slow motion. When the meeting ended, people patted him on the back. "Brilliant work, Ethan. You nailed it. We might actually win this account." He thanked them modestly. Then he glanced at me, just a flicker, and said, "Thanks for the help, Mira. Couldn't have done it without your support." Support. Not work. Support, like I'd just fetched coffee. Something inside me cracked. For 2 years, I had swallowed their jokes, their whispers, their half-smiles. But that day, my silence felt heavier than ever. I went back to my desk, my fingers trembling on the keyboard. The office buzzed with celebration. Someone opened champagne. I stared at the bubbly gold liquid and felt nothing but rage. At lunch, my only friend, Layla from accounting, slid into the chair beside me. "I saw what he did," she whispered. "That was your work, wasn't it?" I looked at her and nodded, my eyes stinging. "You should report him," she said. I laughed, bitter and small. "And say what? That the boss stole my idea? They just call me dramatic." Layla sighed. "You can't keep letting them do this." But I already had. Too many times. That night, I stayed late. Everyone else had left, even Ethan. The city lights bled through the glass walls. I stood there, watching the reflection of a woman I barely recognized. Tired eyes, forced smile, quiet voice. Then I whispered to my reflection, "They'll remember me." It wasn't a promise. It was a declaration. When people look at me now, they see a woman who speaks softly and walks carefully. But I wasn't born that way. I learned it. I grew up in a small apartment above my father's tailor shop. The walls smelled of fabric and steam, and the sound of his sewing machine was the soundtrack of my childhood. My mother used to hum old songs while she cooked, songs from a country she said she missed more every year. We weren't poor, but we lived quietly. My parents believed in hard work, not in showing off. Let your work speak, my father always said. Words are wind. He used to lift my chin when I got shy and tell me, never let them make you feel small, Mira. You are not less than anyone. I wish I had believed him longer. School was where I first learned what different meant. My name was always said wrong. My lunch smelled too strong. My accent made other kids laugh. Teachers smiled at me with pity, not pride. So I learned to shrink,
To fit in.
to speak softly, laugh at the right moments, and never, ever draw attention. But I also learned to watch, to listen, to work harder than everyone else. By the time I finished university, my parents were getting older. My father's hands shook when he tried to sew. I wanted to give them a better life, to prove all their sacrifices meant something. So when I got the internship at Vance and Company, a big marketing firm in the city, I thought my life was finally starting. I still remember my first day like it was yesterday. I woke up before sunrise. My mother ironed my shirt while my father brewed coffee. They both looked at me like I was already a success story. My father said, "Go show them what a girl with fire in her heart can do." I smiled and promised I would. The city was loud and fast, so different from home. I remember clutching my bag like a lifeline on the bus, trying not to wrinkle my clothes. When I reached the tall glass building, I stopped at the entrance, staring up at it. It felt like the world I had always wanted to be part of, shining, important, untouchable. The receptionist greeted me politely, but her eyes skimmed over me like I was invisible. I told her my name.
She frowned.
"Could you spell that?" That was the first time it happened at the office, but not the last. When I met the rest of the team, they were friendly in that rehearsed corporate way. Smiles that never reached their eyes. Quick glances that measured everything. My clothes, my accent, the way I hesitated before speaking. And then there was Ethan Vance, the boss's son, though no one said it out loud. He was sharp, confident, and had that easy charm that made everyone want to impress him. He shook my hand, firm and warm, and said, "Welcome to the team, Mira. You'll do great here." For a moment, I believed him. That first week, I worked like my life depended on it. I double-checked every email, stayed late, volunteered for every task. I wanted them to see that I belonged. But it didn't take long to notice the pattern. When I spoke, people interrupted. When I had an idea, someone rephrased it, and suddenly, it sounded better coming from them. When I stayed late, no one noticed. When others did, they were praised. Still, I smiled. I told myself it would change once they saw my work.
But little things chipped away at me.
The way coworkers laughed about diversity hires. The way someone once said, "You speak such good English." The way they mimicked my pronunciation when they thought I couldn't hear. I remember one lunch break when I sat alone, scrolling through my phone, pretending to read. Ethan walked past and stopped. "You okay sitting by yourself?" he asked. I nodded. "I like the quiet." He smiled softly. "You'll fit in soon. Don't worry." But I wasn't sure I wanted to fit in. Not if it meant becoming like them. Over the months, I started to see how the office really worked. Promotions weren't about talent. They were about who you laughed with at happy hour, who you impressed during small talk, who you made feel powerful.
I wasn't good at any of that.
I was good at the work itself, the research, the numbers, the details, the things no one saw. Still, Ethan noticed. He started giving me small projects, then bigger ones. He'd say, "You're sharp, Mira. You see things others miss." And I'd smile, grateful for the recognition, not realizing how much I wanted his approval. Looking back, that was where it all began, the quiet dependency, the hope that maybe someone finally saw me for who I was. But I was wrong. What he saw was potential he could use. The longer I stayed at that office, the more I forgot my father's words. I became smaller again, polite, efficient, invisible, until the day I couldn't take it anymore. The day I decided silence was no longer my strength. That day became the start of everything. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the revenge, and, somehow, the healing that came after. But before all of that, I was just a girl who wanted to be seen. And I would give anything to tell her, you don't have to be small to survive. Sometimes betrayal doesn't happen in one big moment. Sometimes it happens in small, quiet ways, so subtle that you start thinking maybe it's all in your head. That's how it began for me. Little things. Little cuts. The first time they made me feel small, it was over something stupid. Lunch. I was sitting in the break room, eating the food my mother had packed for me, rice and lentils with a bit of chili. The smell filled the air. A group of coworkers walked in, laughing loudly. Then one of them, Hannah, wrinkled her nose. "Oh my God, what is that smell?" she said, waving her hand. "It's like curry or something." I smiled awkwardly. "It's lentils. Homemade." She laughed. "Well, it's definitely authentic." The others giggled. Another said, "You should bring us some one day. Maybe we'll build up a spice tolerance." They meant it as a joke. Maybe. But my cheeks burned. I smiled. But inside, something wilted. That evening, I threw away the rest of my lunch. The next day, I brought a sandwich instead. It tasted like cardboard. The second time was during a team brainstorming meeting. I'd been working quietly for weeks, trying to design a social media campaign for one of our biggest clients. Everyone was throwing ideas around, most of them safe, predictable. I hesitated, then said softly, "What if we focus the campaign on real people instead of models? Maybe tell their stories through short videos. It could make the brand feel more human." There was silence. Then one of the senior associates, Mark, said, "So basically, like a testimonial campaign?" I nodded. Kind of, but more emotional. Less polished, more raw. He nodded slowly.
I like that.
We could make it look authentic. Ethan, who was leading the meeting, smiled at Mark. "Good point, Mark. Let's explore that direction." My stomach dropped. I wanted to speak, to say it had been my idea, but my voice felt trapped somewhere deep inside me. After the meeting, Mark patted me on the shoulder. "Nice contribution, Mira. It's good to have fresh perspectives." Fresh perspectives. Not ideas worth credit. The third time was worse. We were preparing a client pitch, a huge one. I stayed late every night that week, researching, writing, designing. I poured myself into it. Ethan and I worked closely. He'd often stop by my desk, leaning casually on the divider. "You're really good at this," he'd say. "I don't know how you think of these things."
Ides Mila, stupidly proud.
The night before the presentation, he told me, "Don't worry about coming to the meeting tomorrow. I'll present this one. You've done enough." It sounded like kindness, like he was giving me a break. But when I watched the presentation on the company intranet later, my stomach twisted. Every slide, every line, every chart, all mine. But my name wasn't mentioned once. He even told a story I'd shared about how data and emotion could coexist in marketing, as if it were his own philosophy. When the client loved it, he got all the praise. The next day, our boss stopped by his office and said, "Brilliant work, Ethan. You've outdone yourself." I was in the hallway, hearing every word. He smiled and said, "It was a team effort." Team effort. The same words that would later make my blood boil. That night, I sat at my desk long after everyone left. The office was quiet, just the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of rain. My hands were shaking. I whispered to myself, "It's not fair." But then another voice, the one I'd been trained to listen to my whole life, said, "You should be grateful you even have this job." So I stayed quiet. Then came the day that broke something inside me. We were assigned a project that could make or break our department, a high-profile campaign for an international brand. Ethan asked me to take the lead on the research and strategy deck. For weeks, I lived and breathed that project. I skipped weekends, ignored texts from friends, barely slept. I wanted this to be perfect, and it was. The night before the big meeting, I sent him the final deck with a message. "All done. Fingers crossed for tomorrow." He replied, "Great work, Mira. You make this team better." I smiled at my screen. I thought he meant it. The next morning, I walked into the conference room ready to present. But as soon as I entered, Ethan said, "Hey, Mira, why don't you grab a seat today? I'll take this one." Something fell off, but I nodded. When he began presenting, I realized what he'd done. Again. He spoke with confidence, his voice smooth, steady. The same words I'd written. The same phrasing. Even the same pauses. When the clients clapped, I did too. But my heart was breaking quietly behind my smile. Afterward, people gathered around him, congratulating him. Someone said, "You're a genius, Ethan." He looked over at me briefly, just long enough to say, "Couldn't have done it without my team." And just like that, I disappeared again. That night, I walked home in the rain. My umbrella had broken, but I didn't care. I just walked. I thought about my father's words. "Never let them make you feel small, Mira." But they already had. They made me feel invisible, replaceable, and I let them. Something inside me started to harden that night. I realized that silence wasn't protecting me anymore. It was suffocating me. So I made a quiet promise to myself. If they ever tried to erase me again, I'd make sure the world remembered who I was. They'd remember my name, and they'd regret ever pretending they didn't know how to say it. I threw myself into that project like it was oxygen. I needed it. I wanted it. I thought it would save me. Weeks blurred together. Days folded into nights. I ate at my desk. I slept on the office couch a few times. I drank coffee until my hands trembled. My brain became a loop of strategy, metrics, and storyboards. Ethan showed up early sometimes. He'd hover like a sun around my work and then walk away with the light. He praised me in small ways. He smiled, and I believed him. I thought he cared. We were close to the launch. The client meeting would decide everything. If we nailed it, the campaign would go global. That was the pitch. That was our burden. That was my life for the month. On the Monday before the presentation, I stayed late. The office emptied. The city lights were smeared across the window. I finished the final slides and the speaking notes. I triple-checked the numbers. I embedded references. I exported the deck into different formats. I named every file clearly. I left nothing vague. At 10 p.m., Ethan walked in carrying takeout. "You still here?" he asked, smiling. "Almost done," I said. "Just a few tweaks." He set the food down. "Don't stay up too late." He looked at the deck on my screen. "This looks amazing, Mira." I breathed out for the first time in hours. It felt like a small victory. He said it again. "You did great." I went home exhausted but buoyed. I slept for 3 hours. I woke at 6. I practiced the talk in the subway. I whispered the lines until my throat was raw. At the office, the energy was electric. We locked the conference room. The client arrived. People shuffled papers. I felt steady. Then, 15 minutes before I was supposed to speak, our manager, Dana, asked to see me in her office. "Something came up," she said, closing the door. Her smile was small and fragile. She didn't sit. She only stood there, fidgeting with a pen. "We found some errors in the deck," she said. My heart paused. What errors? She folded her hands. Some of the numbers are mismatched. A few of the charts used the wrong dataset. The legal team flagged a compliance issue. I'm sorry, Mira, but I have to reassign you. Ethan will handle this meeting. It felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. No, I said. I did those numbers. I checked them. I triple-checked. She avoided my eyes. We reviewed the files from last night. There are different versions. We can't risk it in front of a client. I'm sorry. Different versions? I asked. My voice sounded thin.
Yes.
There was a version sent from Ethan's account this morning. It's been edited. We don't know why. Her words were polite. Her tone was final. I tasted metal. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her the truth. Who sent it? I asked. She hesitated. I can't share that. You can't share that? I repeated. My hands were cold. Dana, I worked on this. I stayed up all night. You're taking me off the project for something I didn't do. She said, it's a management decision. I walked out. The corridor seemed longer than usual. The hum of the office felt far away. When I opened the conference room door, I saw Ethan at the head of the table. He looked calm. He looked polished. He looked like the kind of man who never had to explain himself. Hey, he said casually as I entered. You okay? You look pale. I wanted to say you did this. I wanted to shove the truth into his chest. But I swallowed. After the meeting, people congratulated him. They lingered near his desk, smiling, offering praise. I stood at the edge and felt my skin thin. Later, in the bathroom, I sat on the floor of a stall and let the tears come. They came hot and humiliating. I pressed my forehead to my knees and let my chest shake until it hurt. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. How did this happen? I whispered to myself. How did I let this happen? My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Great job today. You'll have more opportunities. Don't let this get you down. I read it and threw the phone across the sink. It hit the tile and skidded away. I sat there a long time, cold and wet-eyed. That night, I packed my bag slowly. I wanted to leave and never come back. But my father's face flashed in my mind.
His hands.
His voice. Let your work speak. I thought of my mother ironing my shirt on the morning I left home. I thought of the sewing machine rhythm. I couldn't disappear. Not yet. On the way home, I walked past the tailor shop where my father used to work. The windows were dark. I put my hand to the glass and felt the chill. I promised myself I would not let this be the end. When I got home, I went straight to my laptop. My hands trembled, but I opened every file. I logged into my account. I dug through folders. I pulled up email threads. I looked for anything that proved what I had done, for anything that showed the timestamps. My stomach flipped. There were gaps, versions with his edits. A morning email sent from his account with a file I had never seen attached. He had the audacity to send my work as his own. He had the audacity to edit it. He had the audacity to roll over me and smile while the world applauded him. Something in me shifted. It was not grief. It was not shame. It was a cold, sharp clarity. Rage sat beside me. Not blinding rage. A precise, patient kind. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could make my nights invisible. They thought my name was forgettable. I closed my eyes and listened to the hum of the city. I remembered nights of study, the sewing machine, my parents' faces lit by lamplight, the way my mother hummed when she cooked. I remembered small kindnesses that had kept me afloat. I stood up and began to plan. First, I copied everything. I exported the original deck. I saved versions with timestamps. I wrote a short note to myself and sent it to my personal email with the deck attached. I printed a copy and slid it into my bag. I wasn't naive. I knew corporate places favored the loud and polished. I knew evidence could be twisted. I knew people would choose the easier story. But I also knew how Ethan worked.
He liked to win.
He liked the applause. He would not let a single meeting slip away. He would take my work again later. He would show the deck to other clients. He would rebrand my nights as his. That's when the smallest, fiercest thought settled in my bones. If he was going to use my work, he was going to use it against himself. I would give him the perfect stage. I would set a trap that looked like a gift. I would make sure that, when the world looked back, they would see the truth in the timestamps, in the files, in the emails. I would make them remember my name. It was not a plan born of malice. It was born of necessity, of self-preservation, of the refusal to be invisible any longer. I went to bed with a notebook on my chest. I wrote a single sentence and fell asleep. If they will take my work and call it theirs, then they will have to stand in the fallout. When morning came, something in me felt different. Hollowed, yes. Angry, yes.
But also steady.
I was no longer the girl who hid her voice. I was a quiet instrument, tuned and ready. This was the night I decided to stop being small. And the night I decided that Ethan would have to answer for what he had stolen. After I was taken off the project, everyone thought I'd disappear quietly. They were half right. I didn't shout. I didn't complain. I simply started to watch. Ethan was still his confident, charming self, laughing too loudly, talking too much, pretending nothing had changed. He liked being the center of the circle, especially with his little group, the same coworkers who laughed at all his jokes, even the cruel ones. He thought people forgot easily. I didn't. I'd seen him mock his seniors during breaks, mimicking their accents, rolling his eyes when they gave feedback. He'd even joked about me once, calling me the quiet one who'll do anything you ask. They all laughed. I'd smiled too, just to survive the moment. But now I was done surviving. Ethan had a habit. He often sent files, memes, and voice notes to his friends through the office chat. Sometimes he'd complain about seniors or brag about how he handled someone. He thought it was harmless. He thought everyone loved his humor. I started noticing his timing, when he bragged, when he joked, when he shared. I didn't need to trap him. He was doing that himself. All I had to do was wait for the moment when his words would meet the right eyes. And I knew that moment would come. He still needed my work. Even after getting me removed from the project, he couldn't start from scratch. I had all the real data, the models, the ideas. He couldn't risk showing up to the big meeting empty-handed. So when he came to my desk a few days later, pretending to be casual, I wasn't surprised. "Hey, Mira," he said, tapping on my desk. "I need those figures you worked on. The client meeting's next week. It's urgent." I looked up, smiled faintly. "Of course," I said. "I'll send them over." He relaxed instantly. "Knew I could count on you." I didn't say anything, just nodded. After he left, I opened the folder. I didn't change a single word.
I didn't need to.
The truth was already there, just waiting for him. I attached the files, sent the email, and watched the message leave my outbox. Then I sat back in my chair and let out a quiet breath. Ethan thought I was helping him again, that I was still the same quiet, naive intern. But this time, my silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. I glanced at the glass wall of the office, where Ethan stood laughing with his friends. I smiled, not cruelly, just knowingly. The first move had been made.
He just didn't know it yet.
The morning of the big meeting felt like a movie I'd already seen. Same glass walls. Same nervous laughter. Same smell of coffee and tension. But this time, I wasn't the nervous one. Everyone was buzzing. It was the day the company's biggest clients were coming in. Investors, partners, senior directors, even the CEO. Months of work would be judged in that single meeting. Ethan was at his loudest that morning. He strutted across the office like he owned it. His shirt was crisp, his hair perfect, and his confidence louder than the hum of the printers. "You ready for the show, people?" he called out, tossing his file on the table. "Big day. Big win." He grinned at his circle, the same colleagues who laughed at everything he said. They chuckled again, feeding his ego. From my desk in the corner, I watched quietly. He didn't look at me. Maybe he thought I'd already faded into the background. That was fine. I wanted to be invisible today. As the clock struck 10, everyone began filing into the conference room. The air felt heavier there, cleaner, colder. A dozen serious faces around the polished table, laptops open, eyes sharp. The clients sat across from the company's top executives. Every chair seemed to hold both pride and fear. Ethan plugged in his laptop, his voice cheerful and loud. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Let's make this worth your time." He clicked the first slide. My work appeared, clean, professional, precise. And then Ethan's voice, clear as day. "Man, these senior heads," he was saying, "they're fossils. They wouldn't know creativity if it danced on their desk." The laughter that filled the video wasn't professional. It was the same laughter I'd heard at the bar, at the coffee table, behind closed doors. The room froze. The very seniors he had named were sitting at the table, watching. Mr. Collins, the creative director, shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Rao, head of communications, stared blankly at the screen. Their faces showed shock and then something worse. Hurt. The video played on. Ethan was mid-laugh, describing meetings, mocking voices, and mimicking hand gestures. His friends laughed beside him, repeating jokes. At first, people in the room didn't react. They were too stunned. Then one of the junior analysts let out a nervous cough that sounded almost like a laugh, but died instantly when the HR manager shot him a glare. On screen, Ethan kept talking, bragging about how easy it was to impress seniors, how he'd twist their words, how they had no clue what real work was. Someone gasped softly. The CEO leaned forward, hands clasped tight. "What is this?" he asked, voice low. No one answered. Then, the video continued, this time shifting tone. Ethan and his friends were now talking about coworkers, laughing, rating, gossiping. Their voices were smug, thoughtless. A few female employees sitting at the table went pale. One reached for her water glass, trembling. Another looked down, her eyes burning with silent anger. Someone muttered, "Is that him?" "Yes," another whispered. The laughter on the screen grew uglier, the kind that strips people of dignity. A heavy silence filled the room, the kind that chokes. Then came the moment I had waited for. Ethan's voice again, sharper, louder, jokingly cruel. "Have you seen Mira? She's the easiest one here to fool. Poor girl, always working, always smiling. She does all the hard stuff. I just clean it up and take the credit." My breath caught. So did the rooms. Someone shifted uncomfortably. The HR manager looked horrified. Ethan's voice went on, still laughing in the recording. "She's so naive, man. Always polite. I could hand her my laundry and she'd say sure, happy to help." And then, the last blow. "You know what's funny? They'll never remember her name. I'll make sure of that." On screen, Ethan kept talking, mocking his managers, making rude comments about female colleagues, joking about diversity hires and cheap labor. He laughed about taking credit for other people's work. "Hey, if they won't speak up, that's on them," he said. "All I do is polish their stuff. Easy win." The screen froze. The laughter on the video ended. The silence in the room didn't. For a full 10 seconds, no one breathed. Ethan's face turned pale. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His friends from the clip sat frozen, wide-eyed, avoiding everyone's gaze. Ms. Patel's expression hardened. "Is this your company culture?" she asked quietly. Then slowly, the CEO spoke. "Turn it off." No one moved. So he stood up and did it himself. The lights flickered back to life. The air felt heavy, electric. Ethan sat there, pale, sweating, his mouth half open. That's not. It's out of context. Ms. Patel looked at him, her face unreadable. That voice was yours. He stammered. It was just banter. Everyone does that. It wasn't serious. Mrs. Rao cut him off sharply. You mocked this entire team, Ethan. You mocked your own people. The HR had folded her arms. And you admitted to taking someone else's work. Murmurs spread. A few people glanced at me. I didn't move. My hands were still, my face calm. Ethan tried to stand, but his legs seemed weak. I didn't mean, Mira, tell them. It was just a joke. Every head turned toward me. I met his eyes for the first time in weeks. I don't think you need me to explain, I said softly. He froze. The CEO turned to HR. Handle this immediately. This company does not tolerate this kind of behavior. Yes, sir, HR replied. Her tone was ice. The meeting ended in silence. As people filed out, no one looked at Ethan. The same colleagues who once laughed at his jokes avoided his eyes. The same friends who called him genius now looked ashamed. The female employees walked out stiffly, anger and disbelief in their faces. The seniors kept their silence, but their disappointment filled the air like a storm. Ethan was left alone in the corner of the room, his reflection trembling on the glass wall. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. When he finally stepped out, he passed by my desk.
He didn't speak.
Didn't look up. His shoulders slumped, his confidence gone. I watched him go. Not with triumph, not with hatred. Just quiet understanding. Truth had done what anger couldn't. I turned back to my computer, opened a blank document, and smiled faintly at the empty screen. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't need to be loud. I had let the truth speak, and it spoke louder than any voice in that room. The next morning, the office didn't feel like the same place. The laughter was gone. The air was thick, heavy with whispers, shifting eyes, and unfinished conversations. Everyone was talking, but no one was smiling. Ethan didn't show up that morning. His desk was empty, his coffee mug still sitting there. World's best strategist printed in bold letters. How ironic. By noon, HR had already called for meetings. One after another, people were pulled into the conference room. Some went in confident and came out pale. Some didn't come out for a while at all. Rumors traveled fast, carried in whispers across cubicles. They're reviewing the video. The CEO's furious. The clients are demanding an explanation. But this time, I wasn't part of the rumor. I was watching it all, calm, quiet, almost serene. For once, the chaos wasn't against me. Around lunchtime, I overheard two of the female employees near the coffee machine. He said that about me, one whispered, her hands trembling. I didn't even know he recorded us, another said, her eyes wet. He didn't record, I thought to myself silently. He just talked, and talked too much. Soon, voices rose. People were angry, not just at Ethan, but at the culture that allowed him to behave like that for so long. Some of the women went straight to HR together. I could see them through the glass room, their faces firm, no longer afraid. They weren't just complaining. They were demanding respect. It was something powerful to witness, the quiet ones finding their voice. By evening, word spread that the board had held an emergency meeting. The decision came quickly. Ethan was to be suspended immediately, pending formal removal. The company issued a statement, professional, short, cold. We do not tolerate disrespect or misuse of authority in any form. The same seniors Ethan had mocked? They walked past my desk later that evening. Mrs. Rao stopped, smiled faintly, and placed a hand on my shoulder. You did well, she said softly. You didn't need to shout to be heard. Mr. Collins gave a slow nod too. Integrity always wins, he murmured before walking off. By the next morning, Ethan's nameplate was gone. And in its place, I received an email from the CEO's office. Mira, we'd like you to take over as project lead for the next phase of the campaign. Your contribution has not gone unnoticed. I just stared at the screen, reading the line again and again. My name, finally standing where it belonged. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to smile, not out of pride but relief. I thought that was the end of it. But fate wasn't done. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I found him waiting near the parking lot.
Ethan.
His shirt untucked, his eyes tired, his expression nothing like the man who used to laugh too loudly. Mira, he called, his voice almost breaking. Wait. I stopped but didn't turn immediately. The sound of his voice no longer stung. It just felt distant, like an echo from a past life. He walked closer, desperate. I wanted to talk. I faced him. About what, Ethan? He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't mean for any of that to happen. You know I was just joking. I raised a hand, cutting him off. You weren't joking. You were cruel. His face fell. You mocked people who trusted you. I continued, my voice calm but sharp. You used my work, my silence, and called it weakness. But you were wrong. He took a step closer. Mira, You don't get to fix this with words, I said. You don't get to hide behind apologies. You built your career on disrespect, and now you're watching it crumble. That's not my doing. That's yours. He stood still, breathing heavily, guilt written all over his face. For the first time, he didn't have anything clever to say. I looked at him, really looked, and realized something. He wasn't powerful anymore. He was just another man who thought kindness was foolishness until it outsmarted him. Goodbye, Ethan, I said quietly. I hope you learned something from this. I really do. And then I walked away. The evening wind was soft against my face. The city lights shimmered across the glass buildings. For the first time, I felt light, not victorious, not vindictive, just free. Days turned into weeks. The storm faded. The office slowly found its rhythm again. People smiled more. Meetings were quieter, more respectful. Even laughter, the real kind, came back. Sometimes I caught the new interns looking at me differently, not as someone invisible, but as someone who had stood her ground and survived. One of them asked me once, "How did you do it? How did you stay so calm when everything was against you?" I smiled. Because silence doesn't mean weakness. It means patience. And patience is louder than pride. That night, I sat by my window, watching the city lights flicker below. And I thought about everything that had happened. About betrayal. About humiliation. About the quiet strength it takes to rebuild yourself. I had learned something precious, that dignity is not something people give you. It's something you hold on to when the world tries to strip it away. I learned that revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes, it's simply letting truth breathe. And most of all, I learned that second chances don't always mean forgiving others. Sometimes, they mean forgiving yourself for staying quiet too long, for trusting the wrong people, for doubting your worth. I opened my laptop and began working on the next project, my project. My name was on the first slide this time, bold and unapologetic. Mira Fernandez, project lead. I whispered it under my breath, smiling. They would remember my name now, not with fear, but with respect.